Japanese doomsday cult. The words themselves mean sacred truth. And they believe it's their job to cause the end of the world. And to be blunt, they're basically whack jobs. And these people have done such horrible things as they unleashed sarin nerve gas in a Tokyo subway a decade ago on March 20th, 1995, caused 11 casualties and 5,000 injuries. They've done other things of a similar nature, and recently they changed their name to Aleph, which is kind of odd because that's the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Then there's the Yakuza. Some people compare these guys to like the mafia, but that's really doing a lot of justice more than it needs to be to the mafia. These guys are far beyond the mafia. It's been called the mother of all crime syndicates, and it's a transnational organization that's more powerful in many countries. They're very much involved with the Japanese government at the deepest levels. They're also very much involved with the Japanese large industrial firms. I mean, let's face it, right now if you buy a car from Toyota or a camcorder from Sony, you're probably putting some money in the pockets of the Yakuza. And these guys are extremely nasty. Again, they make the mafia look like a Sunday school picnic. And these guys have joined forces with Aum Shinrikyo to lease scalar weapon sites from the KGB. Now here's what's happened. As many of you remember, when the Soviet Union fell, its economy fell as well. I mean, it just, total destruction. I mean, everybody was cash strapped. Even the KGB was out of money. And so what did they do? Along came the Yakuza, and they made a really good arrangement. They said, hey, we'll give you $900 million down, and for $1 billion a year, can we lease some of your scalar weapon sites? And they said, hey, sure, what a deal, So in 1989, the Yakuza began training their technicians, and since 1990, this rogue group has been attacking the U.S. by controlling our weather, of course, to our detriment. Now, in 2004, they really stepped up operations big time. And a lot of you may remember, we had very, very strange weather. We had like a whole barrage of hurricanes hit Florida. Those hurricanes did weird things. Ivan did a 180-degree turn. The Hurricane Gene did a 360-degree loop before reaching Florida. And again, this shows the kind of control available through these scalar devices. Now, the next slide has nothing to do with scalar warfare, but I just thought it was very appropriate at this time. Hurricane Charlie hit Orlando, and the winds were so high they actually peeled off a billboard. Underneath was an older billboard that said, "We need to talk, God." And I call that a sign from the Almighty. Like, I'm getting your attention, hello. Now, Hurricane Katrina, same year, but this is very, very unusual because this is the first ever recorded hurricane in the South Atlantic. That's supposed to be impossible. It came ashore in Brazil on March 28 with 90-mile-an-hour winds and did substantial damage. And a lot of people believe this was a deliberate probe by the Yakuza to produce and drive ashore a hurricane where the textbooks say one is impossible. And again, to see if Western scientists and government groups were able to identify that that's what they were doing. And again, there's no evidence that such was the case. Under the watchful eye of the KGB, the Yakuza has carried scalar technology back to Japan, and in clandestine facilities they've been building portable scalar weapons, EMP weapons, possible negative energy weapons. So for example, in some of these visions that Stan was discussing before, you can now very easily get a scalar weapon onto an airplane or onto a jet and have it fly in, and just anything that came at it would just drop down like dead flies all around it. EMP weapons, possibly negative energy EMP weapons. So, they could fit one of these in the back of an SUV or in a good-sized aircraft. The plan that this Yakuza group has is to attack the U.S. power grid within the next couple of years. So watch out, because, see, our power grid is extremely vulnerable. We've already learned up on the East Coast, of course, a couple years ago, they had that really bad blackout that lasted, I think, at least a day or so. And who knows, maybe that was even caused by scalar technology. We don't know. You see there Hoover Dam on the screen. And that is the nexus for the power grid for the whole southwestern United States. And because our power grid is so centralized and so fragile, it's real easy to take out. Beyond that, the Yakuza has used its economic muscle to make a concerted effort to keep all free energy products off the market. That EFTV there means energy from the vacuum. That's what Tesla was working on. That's what many scientists today are working on, free energy from the vacuum. However, the Yakuza won't let it happen. There were two separate Japanese engines that were developed. One was the Takahashi magnetic Wankel engine. The other one was the Kawai engine. Both of those projects were basically quashed by the power of the Yakuza. Secondarily, the U.S. Department of Energy and the energy industry in this country has shows little interest in moving beyond its 100-year-old paradigm. Think about this for a moment, folks. The U.S. power grid in this country is still running the way Edison wanted it to run 100 years ago. The only difference is that they've added a few computers along the way. But this real attenuated, fragile power structure is still in place. They've really made no change in the last century. Now, if they could use instead these energy from the vacuum replacement systems, different things would happen. They would need no central fuel sources. They need no tankers. They need no pipelines. They need no oil refineries. Secondly, the massive and expensive support structure for our bloated power system would be virtually done away with. Our present dependence on foreign oil and gas would virtually disappear. A very drastic reduction in pollution to the environment would result. And also a dramatic reduction of the present absolute vulnerability of the U.S. power system would happen. The resulting benefits of a fuel-free system like this would be immediately evident to both the long-suffering U.S. taxpayers and also to many people overseas that cannot afford to have any kind of power, and the results would be incalculable. However, what would happen to the energy cartels and the energy bureaucracies, the damage it would do to them would be indeed very calculable indeed. And that's the problem. So such powerful organizations do not surrender their control readily. And the sad thing is that there's no incentive in our country for people to produce these kind of energy systems. Not only is our scientific community fiddling while Rome prepares to burn, but it's helping to ensure that Rome burns completely. And of course here Rome would be the United States. Now, it's impossible to understand the level of danger here. Even from like hackers and cyber war techniques, our energy grid could fall apart overnight. This is what I'm going to read from you is an interview that was done on Frontline PBS some time ago with a guy named Joe Weiss, who is an energy consultant. And they asked him this. They said, put it in perspective. What's the worst case scenario in terms of loss of power? He says, absolute worst, I won't even say absolute. The very worst case would be the loss of power for 6 months or more. And they asked, over how big an area? And he said, as big as you want. And they said, is that a possibility? Yes. So imagine being without electrical power for 6 months. It would be devastating to every aspect of our life in this country, and yet they're doing nothing about it. Now the third, The third threat, of course, is from Islamic terrorists. And bin Laden and other terrorist factions have been desperately trying to acquire energetics weapons, but as far as we know, they have not yet done so. And of course, the problem with these guys is, number one, they're perfectly willing to take out civilians as money as they need, and secondarily, they don't care if they die themselves, because of course they're going to go to paradise and have 72 virgins and all of that stuff. So they don't care if they die, and that makes them a very dangerous enemy. And of course, they want to use these kind of weapons to bring down the United States and Israel, and they would be an appalling way to achieve that goal. Then we have U.S. societal engineering. There's a branch of this part of the mind snapper mode that's called psychoenergetics. And what they do with this is they create increasing amounts of fracture lines down U.S. society.